Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Welcome to another Terraria modding video, or the portion of the stream that I go over more of the tutorials for Terraria mods. If this is your first video, been kind of covering over some of the tutorials that I've been looking over the tutorials for Terraria, how to create Terraria mods so that eventually, I will get to a point where um, I will try to construct, um, hopefully, my own Terraria mod so that, um, um, I can post it up, you know, onto the on the workshop, and it gives me a little bit of C# experience, as well as keeping my coding um, at least somewhat fresh. You know, um, so um, but we have ourselves still more to go. We're just kind of covering the easy ones for the time being. Now, obviously, there were some that was, not, I could definitely see that I wouldn't really necessarily need them, um, at least at this particular early stage. I may be wrong. I actually may need them. I don't know. But right now, with the way they described it, it doesn't seem like I would I would necessarily use them at all. Um, so that means, we still got more guides to go on the easy. We're going to be going through the intermediate, the advanced, and, we'll check to see if there's any like other guides that we might need. Like, shader probably isn't going to be needed too much. Um, so, um, but there might be um, some details that I might need. For example, um, if I'm going to be doing this tech tree mod that I'm thinking about doing, then um, it probably would be in my best interest to make sure that I can um, get how the guide is able to interpret, for one thing, be able to go, oh, okay, is this indeed a material? If it's not, then it kind of rejects that, crafting field. Um, so, that might be, kind of a necessary part of code that I might need to look into, see how they go about doing that. And then um, try to use that to my own advantage because, um, when I place a material in there, then and if I haven't like created the next you know material after that, like haven't necessarily discovered that part of the tech tree in a sense, then I can just kind of hide it. Now, obviously, um, um, well, I can make it visible for everybody. Basically show the entire tech tree if they really wanted it to, or I can hide it for them to kind of discover it. Like if they've never done, Terraria before and they want to use this particular mod, then they can just kind of hide everything so that, they won't necessarily get spoiled as to, what they could potentially create in the future, right? Um, or they might have done this multiple times and they want to, just kind of be able to see the entire tech tree, and there you go. And know like, hey, if I do this, 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 and this, it will lead me to the best weapon that I could possibly have, right? So, um, so everybody's going to be a little bit different when it comes to that. Um, so I need to kind of make sure that I can potentially give a tech tree that's useful for pretty much everybody, that might want to use it, right? Um, but let's go on to the logging guide. It might be useful for me to, understand this. I mean, let's face it. Logging is typically necessary for, checking for any kind of errors that might happen that you might not necessarily be able to catch, right? Um, so um, the um, you know, I'm gonna need to make sure that we get, uh, if we're going to write any kind of errors to the logs, we need to know like which ones we're gonna need to write to, how we're gonna need to write to it, so on and so forth. So, okay, so um, tModLoader logs useful information to log files. Users can use logs to identify buggy mods to disable. Users can see the reading client log section in the user FAQ to learn about how to read their own logs to identify buggy mods. Um, Actually, I'm kind of curious. Is the I'm kind of curious if the logs are available or not right at this moment in time. So far, I'm not seeing a folder for logs. So, yeah. Okay. So it looks like, hmm, that's interesting. Oh, gotta sneeze. Pardon me. Okay. Sorry about that. Um, yeah, I'm not really seeing any kind of mods under, or, any kind of logs under the tutorial mod. I guess they'd probably be under a tModLoader itself, right? So yeah, I see the client log and the server log there. So hey there, Katie. How you doing? Welcome back to the stream. How's your day been? Um, so yeah, the client log, um, yeah, pretty much has just today's information, and that's about it. They don't keep the information, up to date. So you really need to make sure that you grab what you want and paste it elsewhere. Otherwise, it will just get pretty much deleted. I don't know if they like delete the logs. Um, or actually, I see a folder called old. So okay, they zip all the previous days logs into zip files that you can reference. Okay. Um, I guess that's an interesting way of going about doing it. But whatever. All right. So, um, All right. I have no clue what you're talking about, but I'm all ears. Okay, so you've kind of stumbled onto my coding portion of the stream there, Katie. Um, so what I'm looking at right now, um, so here, let me kind of show you. In Terraria, there is the possibility of being able to have, to be able to download mods that are available, manage the mods that are available, and, for, for anybody that wants to, they can learn how to develop mods to be added into the tModLoader to try to enhance the, Terraria game. Like right now, using, you know, using some basic code here, you know, um, you know, was able to generate a tutorial sword that was just basically given to me. A lot of this code was already auto-generated for me. Um, and I can just basically, right now I can just easily change the numbers here. Um, you know, change some numbers here about like, how to, the use time and animation. And then suddenly, I'm going to go ahead and save that. I'll go back to the tModLoader and I will build and reload the mod. And now I go into my little testing mod area, character and world testing, and then I can just look at the sword that was previously created, the my tutorial sword, and you notice that 5,000 melee damage, or the damage that you see. Oh, here, let me. Right here. Well, there it is, 5,000 melee damage in the game, right? And then of course the use time and animation basically means that I can use this sword super fast, or if I wanted to, let me save and exit here real quick. We can go back and say, hey, I want this to be super slow, right? So I'm gonna say the use time is a lot larger than before, as well as the animation for said swing is going to be a lot larger as well. And then we go right back into our workshop. We're going to rebuild the mod because while I might have changed the code here, that doesn't necessarily mean that the changes have been done in game yet. So I have to rebuild it in the workshop. I go back to the single player, go back into the world, and suddenly my tutorial sword of 5,000 melee damage is now super slow. So, I mean, that's the most basic of basic things that you can kind of do right at this moment in time. And this my tutorial sword is, you can find that online on how to actually go about doing that. So, so I do appreciate the fact that they kind of changed um, you know, they kind of changed the overall, like, okay, so see that I made these changes here and I saved it, right? Well, the problem is that, that doesn't change the sort here, right? So even though I made the changes to the code, it doesn't affect my current gameplay. So that's why I have to exit, I have to go to workshop, develop mods, and I have to do the build and reload to make the changes effective, in the system itself, in the game, in the gameplay, and now, we have a faster speed and the damage has changed. So now, so that's a basic rundown of what, I've done in the past. Um, but what I'd like to do, here, let me go back into the game here to kind of show um, one of the problems that I have with Terraria. Um, well, see, for our guy, if you've never played Terraria, then if you've played Minecraft, it's very similar to Terraria. If you've never played either one of them, then I'm sorry, it's gonna be kind of difficult to explain it. It's basically a survival game, construction. Um, so the guide here allows for you to go into the crafting menu so that you can basically put a item that is a material. Yeah, well, let me see if I can find. Um, See how this is saying like tin ore 7 can be placed in material in its box there. I don't know if you can see that or not, but I can basically take that. Or let me take this chest because I think it might be a little bit easier. We're gonna place that right here because it says place a material here in the guide. I put that there, and the only option that he's giving me that I can change this chest into is what's called the trap chest. I can make a trap chest with it, but that's it. That's all I can do with this chest. Um, as a material. You know, it can't work with anything that isn't a material. So anything that does not have the material label, I can't put that here for it to be. Um, I can't look to see what it makes because it doesn't make anything. So I can't put anything there. Now, when you're late game, one of the things that I would love to see is what I'm basically calling the tech tree, meaning that um, I would love to be able to like have some kind of book or something that I can kind of click on that will, that I can just click on it. It will open up like a very large screen, like the map here, for example, and it will basically show me all the possible materials, all the materials that I found, um, and it will either show me like question marks for what they could make, meaning that I haven't actually discovered, you know, what they can make. I have to actually build that item to make that next material or the next item from that original material. Or I fill in the screen for, all the possible materials that, might be possible for that one said item, right? Um, Now, it's going to be kind of a mess because there is a lot of, materials in game, and there's going to be a lot of items to find, to use, to make. So it's not going to be extremely easy to do that. So what I'm looking at right now are all the guides that kind of talk about um, you know, that kind of tried to explain to me, um, the initial basics of it, of creating Terraria mods, so that I can eventually take that and hopefully make that tech tree that I might want to make later on down the road. But for right now, I'm not there yet. I don't know everything that there is to know about, the process of making a Terraria mod. So I'm just kind of going over the basics of it. So feel free to ask any kind of questions if you want. I will try to explain it the best I can. If you're still confused about something, you can always ask if I could explain it more, and I will do the best I can to try to explain it in such a way that, hopefully will be informative enough to help you. Um, if you have a coding background, then obviously, you don't necessarily need to worry about anything. um, but if you are someone that has no interest in this whatsoever, then I guess feel free to have me on in the background, and there you go. So, hey, the Licorice, how you doing? Welcome back to the stream. How's your day been? One question: did you miss me? Of course, sir, Licorice. I did miss you. Where you been? Been missing you for a while now, but that's okay. It's all right. Welcome back. So, um, we'll go ahead and do the save and exit there, and let's go ahead and hide our tModLoader and the visual code, and then we'll go back into our login introduction here. So, all right. So the tModLoader uses the log4net library to facilitate logging functionality to modders. Modders can use logs from their users to diagnose and identify bugs and incompatibilities of their mods they develop, which is always helpful for developers. So being able to know what problems their code could be causing is always helpful for any kind of programmer. So modders can read below to learn how to properly utilize logging. YouTube's being a of the next level to me. I hope it doesn't today. Well, I'm sorry to hear about that. Hopefully it doesn't cause you any kind of problems. Okay. Logs are split between files, e.g. client.log and server.log. If there's an issue that happens in multiplayer, the issue might be logged in the server log or the client log, depending on where the code is running. Oh, I gotta sneeze. Alright, sorry about that. Alright, so, that happened. Logs are split between files, client log, and server log. If there is an issue that happens in multiplayer, the issue might be logged in the server log or the client log, depending on where the code is running. If you see client2.log or server2.log, those are logs from a second instance of the client or server running at the same time. Every log output provides at least generic info, log info, time, log level, and source. So time is there, log level is there and source is there. So in addition to the normal logs, there are special logs that can be consulted for diagnosing more unique issues. Environment.log is a log of the environment variables, which it's been a while since I've dealt with environment variables. That one's going to be kind of difficult to explain if I remember correctly, and even then I'm not quite sure if I could really explain them very well. Yeah, I would have to look that up again to see what the environment level variables were again. So we'll have to leave that one alone for right now. Launch.log is a log of the events that happen before the game actually launches. So basically, when you are now, is it the log before the client, the actual client window shows up, or before, you starting up a single player game launching? Not sure where this lies. For example, you go to Steam, you hit play on Terraria or, tModLoader in this particular case. Does the launch.log start up right then and there and takes in all the information about, the process of, when you hit the play button to the point where it, launches the game completely? Or is it, kind of recording down all the information about like, hey, you're kind of moving through the menus and all that kind of jazz. And then as soon as you hit like, start up a new game, launch, the character and the world, once it does all that, then will the launch.log kind of stop? Not quite sure yet on this one. Not sure. So natives.log is a log of native DLL issues and messages. Okay. Again, native is a common term for in programming. Although can't really remember if it's more language based than concept based. Meaning, like I typically seen native more in like C to, C, C++, and C sharp than I would in Java. So I'm wondering if I'm misremembering correctly that it's more, like a C concept than it is a Java. I mean, there's obviously, differences between the two. I just can't really remember if native was also part of Java or not. I don't really remember it in Java though. Yikes. Can't say that I'm, super, um, uh, super programmer. So, Terraria Steam Client.log is a log of the process handling the Terraria playtime tracking feature. Okay, interesting. Not quite sure everything that, exactly what does that take? I don't know. Okay, archiving. All logs are archived in a compressed format so they can be revisited at a later date. These are contained in the old subfolder. These old logs can be consulted for an issue that happened in a previous game session. That's fine. Provided in your mod class comes your own logger object. You can use this to log things on behalf of your mod. inside the log file, your mod will be marked as said source of the log. There are a few different levels of logging. Info should be used for generic informational messages. Warn should be used as a warning, for example, when something went wrong but didn't cause critical problems. Error should be used for critical problems such as mod breaking, potential crashing, or malfunction of systems. Fatal should be used when the application can no longer do useful work due to a critical problem. And debug should be used for additional debugging information, verbose. So, knowing the difference between error and fatal logging can be difficult, but generally you can follow this rule of thumb. An error is fatal if the application can simply not continue due to a problem causing the error. So, examples. So there's info, warning, error, fatal, and debug. This is an informational log. This is a warning. This is an error occurred. Something fatal happened. And sub debug info. And it's like, okay, so yeah, typically when you have an error or fatal, you want to do some stack traces to see where the error might have, you know, where it might have uh, occurred. If you're not quite sure what the stack trace is all about, it's basically when your program runs, it's going through lots of lines of code. And a stack trace basically shows, you know, where that error occurred, like what line of code, you know, caused that error, you know, where it said like, hey, I can't go anywhere else. This line of code is causing me a problem. This is, you know, full on roadblock. I hit a wall, you know, I crashed. Here's all the information about, you know, what happened there, you know. Here's that line of code. Here's the file in which it was associated with, you know, so on and so forth. So, you know, stack traces can be fairly useful, but at the same time could also be a bit confusing if you're not used to it. So, hey there, Kirito. How you doing? Welcome back to the stream. How's your day been? Playing some NBA? Gotcha. Enjoy. Okay, so um, so a little bit of some more information there. The above examples all assume the login is taking place in any mod X inheriting class such as mod item, mod system, etc. If you're logging from the mod class directly, you can just write logger.info example text. If you're logging from some other class, you can use mod content get instance mod name here .logger.info sample text to access the logger of your mod class. So there's all that. What should I log? It can be hard to determine what should be logged. In general, you should try to avoid logging log files with useless items. Ask yourself, what purpose does this item have if logged? You want your logs to be useful, so they need a purpose. The purpose of a log is usually to identify issues or to ensure there are none. Ideally, you only log items that are required for this purpose. For example, you should put any informational log if a system in your mod completed a particular task successfully, e.g. setting up. In case it failed, it would push a warning or error instead. This way, when inspecting logs, you could identify an issue with the initialization of the system if it occurred. Optional logging. You can use the mod conflict and config option to allow a user to determine if something should be logged. And this can be useful for a rare situation that would bloat the log files of the majority of users. An example of this approach can be seen as boss checklist. In this example, logging that would only be useful for modders is provided as an option that can be toggled on, keeping bloat from normal users' log files. You're confused on what to do? What do you mean? Alright, so there's logging. Pretty simple overall. Can be kind of handy for programmers on knowing, what to kind of look for, if you're having any kind of issues as to like maybe your code is crashing or something like that. It's good to kind of log, where and when, how, and stuff like that. Um, so logs can be a useful debugging tool if needed. It could also be used for, if um, if say like, hey, I'm going to bring this up, or I'm going to be using this mod for all the other mods that are out there, and maybe I find that there's an incompatibility somewhere down the line, like one mod is conflicting with another mod, causing like a fatal crash. Then that would allow for me to kind of look at it and go, okay, this isn't working the way it needs to work, so I need to figure out how to go about fix this particular line of code to get it to work. So that's all. So I won 3 championships in the 60s era. I was wondering if I should go for another one or go ahead and start build for the 70s. You got me, my friend. I don't know enough about that game to give you any clear indication as to what you can kind of do on that. Um, I mean, some people, um, I mean, if you have a lot of time and stuff like that, you can always try to see about seeing if you can get a championship for, you know, like I'm assuming that you can pick like all the teams back then. So you can just kind of say, okay, I want to use this team and try to make it to the championship. You can make that team and try to get to the championship. Blah blah blah, right? Um, so uh, you know, now, if you want to set yourself up with something like a personal challenge or something like that, you can always say, "Hey, I'm gonna take every 60s era team and take them to the championship." You could try that. I don't know how well that's gonna go, but one could assume, you know, with a skilled player that every team should be able to get to the championship round, one would think. But then again, some might be a little bit harder to do than others, right? Some players might not necessarily have the stats for that. But um, you can also like pick the worst team ever, then pick all the worst ball players on that team, and then kind of give yourself the challenge to try to make it to the championship, and give yourself the hardest difficulty, that you can kind of go for. There's an option, um, but yeah, I don't know enough about that game to really give you any clear um, paths to choose from on that one. So, all right, basic minion guide. Again, probably not something that I'm going to be worried too much about, because um, minions, aka, summons, is not going to be really necessary um, for my user interface. I'm not going to really need it, right? So, I mean, this might be great if you do want to create yourself like a minion or a summon or something like that, and all that. So, um, but I don't really think that I'm really going to be needing much, if at all, any of this to do the mod that I'm kind of looking for at this time. So, um, so yeah, I think, to be honest, I think I'm just gonna go ahead and kind of skip this one. Um, yes, I don't think I really need any of it. So, I think we'll skip that one. All right, mod config. What's this all about? Okay, not that large of a coding session here. So, basic JSON and mod configs. Okay. Introduction. Before we begin, it's important that you understand what a config is and how a mod config is handled. First of all, config stands for configuration. No shit, but at the same time, if you've never done any kind of programming before, sure. Um, good for like me, maybe first time, like maybe kids or something like that. I don't know. And with that, we often mean a configuration file. There are many formats for configuration files, and tModLoader, we use a language called JSON for mod configs. JSON stands for JavaScript Object Notation, and we will delve a bit deeper into the meaning and inheritance of this name. JSON is a language used to store data in a specific format and is used for data interchanging. Now, bear in mind, JSON, while we're seeing this in tModLoader right at this moment in time, is also used out in the real world. So, you know, so if you want to get into, any kind of programming and stuff like that, I mean, JSON is pretty much, you know, um, you don't want to learn JSON, because you're going to be using it out in the business world as well. So don't don't cut yourself short on that. JSON is often preferred over other languages because it is lightweight, flexible, and unstructured, meaning it supports any structure. Although certain other languages like XML or uh, YML or YAML or YAML provide more features, they are not as lightweight. JSON was derived from JavaScript, although it is adapted into many languages by now. In fact, all JSON really is JavaScript objects. JSON is the official internet media type, and files use the .json file extension. How does JSON work? JSON is comprised of data objects consisting of an attribute value pairs and data array data types. If you know how a JavaScript object is built, JSON files are very simple for you. Let's get right to it. Here is a JSON sample showcasing its basic data types. So you have a key and you have a value. You have a number and you have its value. You have a string and then you have its string value. You have a boolean and its value. You have an array and all the values contained in said array, which again could be in another array. You can have an array within an array, and apparently you can have multiple. I don't know how deep you can go with this. You know, like could you have how could you have an infinite amount of arrays in an array? Don't know. I don't know if there is a certain limit to it, um, but right now it doesn't seem like there is really anything potentially stopping it. So, but that can be kind of dangerous as well because now you're going to be getting into a confusing state as to, well, how do I access all these arrays over and over and over and over, all the way down to get to that one piece of speck of information that you're looking for. And why? So, so you kind of have to be careful with that, so you don't like create an infinite loop of arrays there. We have an object which has additional keys, you know, inside of it, you know, that you can reference, and you have their, you know, additional information, you know, tied with that. You know, although it looks like it's more strings than anything else. So, but I would imagine that, you know, in said object, you can also do, you know, a form of number, a, you know, string, a boolean, however you want, you know, inside the object, and it won't really matter. Now, bear in mind there, folks, you don't necessarily need to have, you know, it to be, you know, strictly saying number here. You know, you can have just something, you know, being a representative of said number. You know, some other name could be placed here, you know, and then you have your number to the right, and that will work. Okay. Um, it's just best to make sure that you give yourself a clear uh, description of it. So if I access this JSON file and I say, hey, I need the key of X. Okay, well, what does X contain? Don't know. X could basically contain anything at that point because I don't know exactly what might go in there, right? Um, now, um, if I put something saying like value true or false, you know, to kind of represent, say, the Boolean, then I'll know that, hey, you know, the value that I'll most likely be seeing is true or false. And that's it. So, you know, so sometimes, you know, labeling, you know, having the right kind of description is good there. So, you know, much like how they have description there, for example. So, you know, array with objects, you know, and then of course you have an object and then, you know, the data contained within said objects. So, and then of course you have the array of multiple objects. So, as you can see, the sky is the limit. In JSON, you'll be storing basic data types, strings, numbers, booleans, arrays, booleans, and slight. They didn't necessarily look at what they were typing. Strings, numbers, booleans, arrays, booleans. Okay. And also null values. The above example showcases all basic data types and also in ways they can be combined. Next, we will go over important remarks. Important remarks. Take a good look at the above example. The most important aspect of JSON is the key value or name value pairs. It boils down to a specific key matches to a certain value. Notation key and then value. Unlike a language such as C#, which uses a compiler, you did not specify the data type. It is parsed automatically. What is also important is that each, well, okay. If you're not quite sure what he's talking about here, okay, you know, that could confuse anyone if you're not used to it, right? Um, so, um, when you are, you know, working with any kind of code, you know, you're running down your code, you're putting it all together. Typically, not all of them, but typically, um, once you're done with the code, you can then build the code to see whether or not you know you can run it. Okay. When you build the code, you're checking to see whether or not there's any additional errors in there, right? Um, you know, much like the that tModLoader screen, where I was kind of showing, develop mods, and here's the build and reload. Um, the that's that's basically what I'm kind of talking about by building the code into something that the program can then use. If there are any kind of errors in the code, such as here, let me kind of bring out the code here. Um, if I create an error, typically it you know um, for one thing, it will kind of show the fact that, hey, you have a problem here, or at least any good IDE will kind of highlight the fact that you have an issue with this particular line right here. Now I'm saving it right now, um, but I'm not building it yet, right? So if I go to tModLoader, go to Workshop, and I try to build and reload here, hey, we got ourselves a little bit of a problem. I have an error with my code because it's expecting that semicolon at the very end of the line in order for it to work. So so now I can just kind of go right back here. I can put in that semicolon in there to be, to fix the issue, and then I can come right back over here, and then I can do the retry. Now notice how it, shows the file and the basically the line and the position. You know, it was line 18 at at well, it was saying 19, but technically it's supposed to be column 31. I'm assuming that if I move this all the way over, even then that doesn't really work all that much. So I'm not quite sure where the 19 is coming from there, but um, but at least line 18 gives you a rough idea as to where it is. Um, so we make sure that this is saved again, and we do the retry, and hey, it works this time, right? So um, so here's the thing. When it comes to languages such as C Sharp, it has to go through a compiler to make sure that the code that you built works properly. Okay. Or has no errors. Now it still might have some problems in there. Like it might still have some like infinite loops in there, or you might have messed up on memory location, memory placement, and so on and so forth, and you're gonna just cause yourself some additional headaches afterwards. But the compiler is meant to kind of make sure that um, you know, while there might be some mistakes in your code that might occur during runtime, there shouldn't be any mistakes like a missing semicolon at the very beginning of when you build it, when you're compiling the code. Now, JSON doesn't have a compiler. You don't need to worry about a compiler with it. Okay. Um, which um, you know, when he described it being um, unstructured, well, yeah. So you could pretty much put kind of whatever you want in the overall structure here, and you know maybe it will work, maybe not, and not quite sure exactly, right? you don't necessarily have a compiler to kind of check it, right? So you might have some very interesting um, effects if you're not careful. um, so, um, you do not specify the data type. You know, it doesn't care about data types. So while you might say like, hey, this is a Boolean, it doesn't care. You can put a number right in this Boolean, and it will, it will look at it and go, okay, well, you're saying that this is Boolean, but in reality, it's a floating number. It's not going to care. It's not going to go, what are you doing here? This is wrong, right? If you were using C# and you were saying, hey, this Boolean variable is equal to number, it's going to have a problem. The compiler is going to complain about it. Okay. Here, let me kind of demonstrate it. If you're not used to coding, right? So if I was to go, hey, I have a integer, which is a number value, and I'm going to say this number value is going to be equal to this is wrong because this is a string, not an integer. So it's already flagging me saying, hey, I can't convert this string type that you're putting here, in this particular section of code and put it into this integer value. It's not going to understand that. It doesn't know how to handle that. So you have to, guide it in properly, right? But for JSON, it doesn't care. You can do this perfectly fine. Granted, you don't necessarily need int there. It'll just like, there you go. But still, so yeah, that's a little bit there, concerning that line. So, what is also important is that each element should be separated with a comma apart from every last element. You're free to include a comma for last elements, but it is not required. To familiarize yourself with JSON, it is recommended to fiddle a bit with it using JSON lint, which is a JSON validator. JSON lint will tell you if your JSON is valid, and if not, it will tell you where it went wrong and why it went wrong. So apparently, JSON lint is a good, um, interpreter IDE. Much like the um, the VStudio code that I'm showing right there. So apparently JSON lint is very similar to that, I guess. To handle any kind of JSON example code or code that you might want to have anyway. So how do modders utilize JSON for Terraria modding? With Terraria tModLoader mods, modders don't directly use JSON. Modders can make ModConfig classes which use JSON to store configuration info. See example configs.cs for more information on ModConfig. If you'd like to inspect JSON files from ModConfig added by mods you use, these can be found in ModConfigs. Windows, blah, 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 ModConfigs. Folder as a JSON file. This file will only show deviations from the default values, so it might just be an empty file with only brackets as its contents. It isn't usually useful to look at the files directly, but you could get some insight from them. So, your file could have all of this just not there. And all it has is just basically, an opening bracket and a closing bracket. And that's it. So, But that's it for the basic JSON and mod configs. Um, so there's that. So next is mod dust, which again, I don't think I'm going to be really needing this too much. I probably will be needing to look at this mod item a little bit more. Mod projectile, probably not going to be needing. Might need the mod recipe or the recipe guide. So that's potentially what's on the what's going to happen on tomorrow's stream. But that's going to be it for tonight on this um, Terraria mod session. We're going to go ahead and close it down here. Um, more material to cover, more items to look at, and we'll be, getting to a point where, well, I'll get to a point where I will eventually start working um, on the tech tree. How? I don't know. It's going to be an interesting process. But because you have to understand, ideally, I would like to get it to work with the Calamity mod that, both I and Blackheart are using right now, or, that Blackheart and I are playing right now on Monday nights. Um, Now, I don't know if I'll ever be able to get to that point um, where the I'll be able to actually use it, you know, in the game itself, and my and Blackheart's game. Um, but I would like to kind of be able to get it to be somewhat usable for like maybe anybody else that might come along and go, oh hey, a tech tree, and a material tech tree, what, that kind of thing, right? So that people can kind of see it and go, oh, okay, you know, I can use it. Oh, okay, it's useful for both vanilla and Calamity. Great. Now, ideally, I would love to be able to set it up so, um, in a sense, it'd be nice to be able to kind of set it up so that if anyone adds like a new weapon or something that's a new material, then the tech tree will be able to take that information and build the information like right then and there. It won't necessarily need to worry about, um, trying to figure out like, oh, hey, um, you know, uh, like, I hope that I can build it so that it's dynamic enough to be able to handle any new materials coming in, new weapons, new artifacts, anything that gets thrown at it. Basically, try to make it so that it can be used with any additional mod at any point in the future without too much changing. That's that's the ideal situation. Am I going to be able to do it? Don't know. But we'll see what we can do with it. We'll see if I can get it to work. But that's going to be it for today's Terraria mining session. We're going to go ahead and switch on over to um, Warframe and get prepped for Warframe tonight with Blackheart. And then, yeah, that's going to be it. So I'm going to go ahead and stop this video here.